are talking Lantern's Lane, written and directed by Justin LaRue. Now, this is essentially a slasher movie that tries to have a little bit of window dressing of a haunted house movie and a few kind of twists and turns a la a kind of thriller. So it tries to have its finger in many pies here. But what's the story? Let's discuss. So it focuses on this group of young adults, and they're kind of friends previously from school, and they're kind of getting together after a kind of a period of time, and some of them haven't seen one another for a long time, and there's a bit of animosity between some of them, and it's kind of led by this kind of particular girl who's kind of moved away to the city, who's now returned, and the four of them decide to go to this kind of old abandoned house on Lantern's Lane because apparently you can see a ghost there if you happen to be in the right kind of time and things like this. So they decide that they're going to go to this kind of area to try and find this ghost, and decide that they're going to go and investigate this old abandoned house which apparently kids were murdered at. And while they're there, they seem to be stalked by a masked slasher wearing what looks like kind of a scarecrow get up, who's intent on killing them. However, it gets a little bit more complicated than that, which I won't going to go into. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works with Lantern's Lane. I kind of like the idea here that there is a few misdirects in what's going on, but without it kind of really going to kind of left turns. I feel that there's sometimes with movies that try to kind of have a twist or a kind of a change kind of direction halfway through the movie. Sometimes they just take a complete left turn that you can't see coming. And I've got to say with this one, actually, I think, although it does kind of change kind of directions a couple of times within the movie, I actually think it does it fairly naturally, and it doesn't feel kind of particularly kind of forced. So I actually think in regards to a script point of view, that kind of idea was quite solid. I also quite like the kind of our kind of characters, because they have a little bit of kind of depth to them. As I say, some of the characters here, they have some animosity towards one another. There's kind of some history here that's kind of hinted at, and people have feelings that are kind of bubble to the kind of the surface. So I think there's an attempt here to give some decent characterization to our four characters. It's not overstuffed with too many characters here. It does have almost a feel of a Scooby-Doo sort of style adventure, this one, I would have to say. If you're watching this, it's kind of without the dog, but it kind of feels like an adult Scooby-Doo is adventure. It's kind of how I would best describe this movie. There's a couple of kind of interesting, as I say, twists and turns in the film, which I thought, were reasonably kind of handled. It's somewhat of a whodunit, and I quite like this kind of location that they've got here. This kind of abandoned house makes some kind of some quite interesting, backdrops to this kind of particular kind of setup, and I like the kind of the mythology that's built around it as well. Okay, let's talk about what doesn't work. I think there's some real problems with our four characters. I like the fact that this movie has tried to give them some depth in regards to their character traits and and personality types and kind of backgrounds. That I appreciate. However, I feel that there is some real outside of that, there's some problems in regards to how they're written. Their reactions to one another and how they act. And I think this is partially the actor's fault, but partially the director's fault. How they're kind of acting together at times seems really unnatural. And I couldn't help but feel the actors looked like they really just didn't know what to do. So you'll get to go into a little bit more detail what I mean by this. You have the kind of the actors standing there saying sort of dialogue, and you feel like they kind of want to be doing stuff with their hands, but they're just kind of swinging them around and don't really kind of know what to do, and are kind of like shifting uncomfortably around the kind of the set or the location because the direction hasn't been very good. They kind of don't really know what they're supposed to be doing. So you have this kind of really unconvincing kind of like interactions between the kind of the characters, and you feel like the actors here haven't really been given a lot of direction about what they're kind of supposed to be doing. And, you know, we have these kind of interactions, and there's like uncomfortably long pauses and things like this, and it just feels like, it doesn't feel like natural kind of dialogue. So when our characters are interacting, they seem really, really uncomfortable with their, you know, supposed positions with one another. And I get that this movie is meant to have this layer of sort of, some of the characters have a sort of mean feelings towards one another, and I understand that, but it's outside of that. It just looks like the characters and the actors are very, very awkward and don't really know what they're doing. To go hand in hand with that, it just seems like there's decisions here that don't really make sense, and it's a hell of a lot left to coincidence and kind of like, again, I don't want to spoil anything for you in regards to the plot surprises here, but there's, you know, it just seems to have, for this to have been pulled off like it has, everything would have had to fall into place. It just seems there's no way you could plan this. Again, I'm trying to be vague. But, you know, when everything is revealed, thinking, how has that happened? Because it just seems like there's no way that you could have planned ahead at a time about what has happened with this film. Again, apologies about being vague, but I don't want to kind of spoil it for you. So it just seems kind of like quite implausible as in regards to a kind of a plot and in regards to what happens. And then we kind of actually, I've got to say, our killer is a little bit disappointing. Shows up a little late, and I feel there's not enough done with that particular kind of killer. It kind of just looks like someone with a sack on their head. I don't feel if there's much done in regards to scare factor with it. It doesn't really feel like it's this kind of character is stalking necessarily, or all that menacing. And there's a reveal about that obviously what happens, and again, I don't think it was handled the best. So overall, it's a watchable movie, but I don't think it's particularly all that clever, and it just left me feeling a little bit cold in regards to any type of believability. And for another thing, again, this might be a minor nitpick, the kind of the lighting here, we're meant to believe this is a shack out in the middle of the woods, but it's way overlit. You know, it would be like pitch black in there without any electricity, and kind of like, it's just like there's too much light in there. You know, it looks like there's street lights outside, which means that it would be in a relatively residential area, things like this. So it's just kind of like, you know, it just doesn't ring true. It really just feels like this movie was put together at pace and doesn't really it doesn't feel like it's been thought out as much as it should have been. So overall, it leaves me somewhat unfulfilled in regards to a viewing experience. Not bad, but below average. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to you next time. Bye for now.